One, two, three. I think we're there. Okay, we're there. Okay, welcome. University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. Go ahead, Dr. Krekta. Oh, we're going to find you one that works too.
Oh, okay. Okay. We're in business. Okay. So Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for having us today. I'm Holly Krekka, Executive Director of the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. With me is Scott Quillinan, Senior Director of Research at the University of Wyoming School of Energy Resources. So we just have a quick 20 minutes. We're going to go fast. And I do believe I have slides that are getting pulled up now. Okay, perfect. So please go to the next slide. So at the School of Energy Resources, we are housed at the University of Wyoming, overseen by the Energy Resources Council. Our mission is energy-driven economic development for Wyoming. We are focused primarily on generating incremental revenue for the state of Wyoming. So to quickly give you an update, go to the next slide. Actually, two more. So topics that I plan to cover today, giving you a continued update on our external funding. So the last time we were in front of you, we talked about the projects that have been funded over the last year at School of Energy Resources from external sources, not necessarily from the state, but could include cost share. And Mr. Co-Chairman had asked me to talk just a little bit about how each one of those works we believe will benefit the state of Wyoming. And it doesn't include the exceptional new number of state-funded projects as well that we're working on. So I'll talk a little bit about those as well, or Scott will. For example, our Mowry project, the Phase 2 RFP results. We're going to talk a little bit about our Wyoming Carbon Safe project and CCUS advancement in general, work being done by the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis, including state support with the unusually high number of federal rules coming out. We've been trying to leverage the expertise at the School of Energy Resources and across the University of Wyoming to support state elected and appointed officials, and then give you an update on the Integrated Test Center. So next slide, please. So on this slide, on slide 5 of the deck, we have a list of recent competitive proposals that have been funded. By recent, I mean over the last 12 months. The School of Energy Resources has helped both our own internal research staff as well as tenure track faculty across the University of Wyoming to prepare proposals, in most cases to federal funding agencies, but not exclusively, to bring these funds to Wyoming. So I'm just going to go through some of these. I'll focus only on those that were awarded unless you have questions, but to talk about what we see as the benefits for these specific projects and why they would fit under our mission at the School of Energy Resources. So the first one is focused on coal-derived graphene materials for industrial applications. That was awarded. It's simply put, looking at new uses for Wyoming coal, and it actually was focused on making coatings using coal for pipelines. The next one is the Hero Basalt Carbon Safe Phase 2. That is focused on creating a carbon storage hub adjacent to a natural gas power plant in Oregon. Why in the world are we doing that? Because that gas plant, it creates electricity. It uses natural gas produced right here in Wyoming. And it's in a state with decarbonization goals. And we want to provide that plant that uses our fuel a pathway to continue operating long into the future. Carbon Safe Phase 3 in Sweetwater Carbon Storage Hub. That is creating a hub in the southwest part of Wyoming for carbon storage. That is a $50 million project. 40.6 of that was from the federal government. Focus on, this can be for any energy sector or extractive sector. So for example, this hub is adjacent to all the trona mines and their processing. As you may know, Wyoming trona is one of the lower greenhouse gas footprint tronas in the world, much, much lower than what's produced in China through synthetic means. provides a path to even lower footprint, which might make it more marketable in some parts of the world. The Nuclear Energy Research Center Faculty Scholars Program that trains students and supports faculty to start new work in nuclear. We obviously have a nuclear power plant coming into the state. We need to make sure that the state's only four-year research institution is training students that can be part of that workforce. Okay, I'm going to try to keep going, go a little faster. On the integration of produced water, thermal desalination and steam methane reforming, a lot of complicated words. It's a really cool project. It's focused on making hydrogen, but it solves a lot of problems for the Wyoming energy sector. So it's using produced water. Produced water is one of the most expensive parts of oil and gas production, is dealing with that produced water. So this takes produced water, takes the oil that's still in the produced water, skims it off, uses that to heat the water, and then uses that water with natural gas for steam methane reforming to make hydrogen. So it does several things there. It treats the produced water, which is really expensive disposal costs, but it also creates a new market in terms of hydrogen, or a new product from Wyoming natural gas. Okay, that next one was declined. That was their loss. Wyoming Class 6 Characterization Database. This is really cool. This is a collaboration between the School of Energy Resources, the Wyoming State Geologic Survey, and Department of Environmental Quality. And essentially just we have collected so much information on the subsurface and CO2 storage over the years in Wyoming. This is putting it all together so that projects in Wyoming, the data can be approved and vetted by DEQ, which is our Class 6 permitter in the state, because we have primacy. And it will essentially make Wyoming more competitive to recruit some of these projects that are looking for a home, and make projects move faster. Let's see. The TNC, that's the Nature Conservancy Industrial Decarbonization, simply looking at CO2 storage opportunities adjacent to industries. Novel coal-derived char-based aggregates for highway applications, actually funded by WYDOT. This is really a very early stage, but we're excited about this. This is, once again, trying to find incremental uses and new uses for Wyoming coal. Aggregate is a 1 billion ton a year market. So if we were able to break into that by creating aggregate from Wyoming coal, that would be a huge opportunity for the state. And I think that's it. So, but I know that was fast. What I want you to know is that anytime we undertake a project, whether it's federally funded by industry, or funded by the state, we're always making sure and viewing it through the lens of how is this ultimately going to drive incremental revenue for Wyoming. And so tried to go through that really quickly, just for those projects that have been funded externally, not including all our state funding for the last year. So with the next slide, we will, Scott's going to take over and talk about his, this project is really exciting to bring together folks at UW to focus on the Maui project. And this is all Scott's baby, so I'll let him talk about it.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, may I interrupt? I just want to follow up because we are going really fast.
Yeah.
Wyoming is trying to position itself as a leader in the CCUS space. And so kind of just stepping back from the presentation you just provided, can you tell us how you're attracting like the latest talent that's available out there? And then what is kind of the process that the School of Energy Resources uses to look for future grant opportunities?
Dr. Kreckter.
Great question, Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis. So great question. First of all, I will tell you that Wyoming is a leader already in CCUS, and having been in that field for a long time, I wanted to come here because of the team that was already here, and it's really truly led by Scott, and he's been working on this for decades. So I think it's important to acknowledge that we're building on a very strong foundation, but as we continue to grow, we do have to attract top talent, and it can be challenging. So I think our 3 main approaches is, one, hire UW students that we've often worked with as they've gotten their education at the University of Wyoming and hire them before they go out into the workforce and realize how much money they can make in industry. Having said that, some people want to stay in Wyoming and some people want to come back from Wyoming. So we have an incredible examples of that. Just two individuals come to mind who were in Houston at Chevron and are the husband. It's a couple. The husband was raised in Laramie and wanted to come back, and so they're moving their family back to Wyoming to work on this work. And then third is we actually are now offering the nation's first undergraduate CCUS degree, certificate, not degree, certificate. And so we're trying to also create opportunities to train that workforce of tomorrow. And I would say also working with the students that graduate from the Energy and Petroleum Engineering Department have great backgrounds for this as well. So that was 4 actually.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Just talking to a group over the Department of Transportation telling me, do you know how much more we could make in the private sector? Okay, any other questions? Go ahead. It's all yours, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So today I get the privilege to talk about the Mowry project, to give you an update. If you remember, we're in phase 2 of this program. Phase 1 was funded through the Wyoming Energy Authority, and phase 2 was funded through the Wyoming Legislature at $2.5 million. And what we've done with those funds in the last 5 months since we've started, is we put out a competitive request for proposals for all of our faculty across campus. And so we received some really high quality proposals during this round, which was fantastic. So I think we've got 25 responses. We were able to pick 13 of those and fund those. But across those 13 projects, we now have 20 faculty and research scientists working on the Mowry Shale. That's across 8 different departments, and it's funding it's funding 20 graduate students. Why are we looking at the Mowry Shale? It's probably Wyoming's next big unconventional play. Right after the Niobrara kind of starts to decline, I think we'll see the Mowry come on really strong. The federal government is not funding oil and gas research at the moment. Without this project, we wouldn't have the funds to help support our faculty to continue to work on oil and gas innovation. This is something that University of Wyoming is doing that other universities around the country aren't able to provide their faculty. So this is really an opportunity for us to kind of maintain that leading edge to keep our faculty working. You said I had 3 minutes and I've already used it. But I'm also really grateful for Mr. Obermuller and his stakeholders and how they support this project and interacting with our faculty and students. And the Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute and the Wyoming Geologic Survey have also been great reviewers on those projects. So the next few pages, you'll see just a list of those projects and the faculty that are leading them. They're in your packet, so I'll just leave those with you. But it's turning into a really fantastic program. So if you fast forward just a couple more slides until we see Carbon Safe. There we go. Okay, so I also want to give you an update on the carbon storage projects that we have operating around the state. So just north of here, operating at Dry Fork Station, we have the Wyoming Carbon Safe project. It's in phase 3. We've drilled 2 deep stratigraphic test wells at that location. We've completed them to Class 6 standards. We just recently completed the environmental assessment for that project. It should go, I think DOE will release it by the end of the year for public comment. So that was a huge milestone for us. And then soon by the end of the year, we'll be submitting the Class 6 permits to DEQ for their review. The Sweetwater Carbon Storage Hub, which Dr. Krucka have already mentioned, so I won't belabor that one anymore. But those 3 Class 6 applications are out for public comment as we speak. You also talked about the Class 6 database. So let me just go to the bottom there and just mention Professor Rigetti from the College of, an SCR professor at the College of Law, who recently put out a frequently asked questions, or what every Wyoming landowner should know about carbon capture and storage, just to kind of help educate our communities out there as this industry starts to take off. And she's also investigating the value of our pore space. So coming up with equations, not all pore space is equated this or is created the same. So she's looking at different equations that we can use to really understand what the value is of that pore space at different depths and different formations on federal lands and across the US. So with that, let's go to the next slide. One more. Okay, so I just want to brief update on the Center for Energy Regulation and Policy Analysis. This is being led by Kara Fornstrom, which many of us know. She's doing a really great job. Just really want to highlight a few papers that are soon to be coming out. So we've got a nuclear fuel enrichment paper and what that might mean for Wyoming. We should see that in the next couple of weeks, next month. Looking at market opportunities for Wyoming natural gas that's being shipped to the West Coast and what lower carbon intensity gas does in those markets. Of course, Kara's background is on the electricity sector. She's got some really neat work coming out on electrical liability. And I'll skip down, and she's doing a lot of state policy support. So just working behind the scenes, thinking about what's going on at the BLM or the Rocky Mountain or the Rock Springs Resource Management Plan, the BLM coal leasing problems. Just know that SERPA is behind the scenes supporting all of those efforts. So with that, let me hand it back to you, Dr. Krupka.
Okay, so the last topic we were going to cover today was the Integrated Test Center. So just as a reminder, that's right here in Gillette, adjacent to Basin Electric's Dry Fork Power Plant. It's a technology neutral test center for carbon capture and use technologies. It's at the same location our Carbon Safe project is. Really exciting times at the Integrated Test Center. And also as a reminder, the governor delegated administration of that center to the School of Energy Resources on March 7th of this year. And so I think just as an update, the funds have been transferred to the School of Energy Resources. We now hold all the administrative contracts and the service contracts. And then the last step is that the governor's office will be finalizing leases both with Basin and the tenants. And so that is ongoing. But for all intents and purposes, we are now running the Integrated Test Center. And it's a busy time there. So the J. Cole's Kawasaki Heavy Industry, they're testing a solid material for capture. They are now accepting flue gas and are testing that at about the 1 megawatt scale. And then MTR, the membrane technology research, membrane-based carbon capture that was mentioned earlier, is under construction today. So the facility is essentially full for the next year or so, and I'm looking for tenants after that. So that concludes our slides and our formal remarks.
Okay, thank you. There was a question. Go ahead. Which one of you?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess a question to both of you. I mean, you obviously, you pointed out already that Southwest Wyoming is a heavy, I guess, let's say, target-rich environment. We're all governed by the Title V air permitting. What is the value, or more importantly, can you articulate what the value is, the SCR, and how that enables us to remain competitive as these increased reductions or restrictions or requirements come about? How can we be more competitive? And how are you helping in that regards? And the second part of that question actually you mentioned state policy. Obviously, the state of Wyoming has been very, very supportive as a legislature as well as a governor on this endeavor. My concern is you mentioned respectfully that the federal government has not been that supportive. As you mentioned, maybe we are only one community and or one college pursuing this. My concern is, how do we elevate the optics and or the promotional or the good work that the state of Wyoming is doing such that it becomes more known, that Wyoming becomes more, I guess, designated as a leader? And how do we show the excellent research and work that the SCR is doing? Because it seems like we know about it in Wyoming, but I'm worried about our federal folks not understanding truly what's going on here as it relates to carbon sequestration or capture or injection, whatever, as well as enhanced oil recovery. So those are my two questions.
Dr. Krupka.
Great question, Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad. So we ask ourselves this every day. I do think there is increased recognition in some areas, maybe of what Wyoming has accomplished in terms of its natural gas production being just very environmentally friendly natural gas. Wyoming has the lowest greenhouse gas footprint associated with its gas production in the Western US of any other state. And both Pure West and Jonah Energy have had structured deals so that gas is worth more. So as we build out CCUS as an opportunity, both for natural gas, but also for Trona, for coal, I think those structured deals and being able to get incremental revenue for having really what is called a differentiated product is part of the solution. In terms of enhanced oil recovery, I think we also have really something special in Wyoming to talk about. We've had a hard time getting traction and recognition of the value of enhanced oil recovery more broadly. I mean, we know what great benefit it provides to the state. I know the director of Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute is here and can talk about the revenue that enhanced oil recovery generates for the state. But when the federal moratorium on oil and gas leasing was put in place at the beginning of this current federal administration, SCR professor of economics, Tim Considine, undertook a study calculating the financial impact to Wyoming of that moratorium should it be carried forward. And it was like $20 billion to 2040. It was absolutely crushing. But a second study that you don't hear about is that Enhanced Oil Recovery Institute, SCR, and the Wyoming Energy Authority also did a study on the greenhouse gas impact. And of course, because Wyoming's oil and gas has a lower carbon footprint, the net impact was an increase in gas from that action, because overseas oil and gas is dirtier than Wyoming. And so that we could not get picked up. The economic study was, I mean, it was everywhere. It was on NPR. I heard it driving to work, but we haven't quite figured out how to get attention on that, like the negative impacts of some of these decisions, even from a greenhouse gas footprint standpoint. And so we continue to work on that. I also think we mentioned a lot about Class 6 wells. We'll have the first 3 Class 6 wells in Wyoming issued shortly. I mean, these are real projects that are going to drive economic development in the state. So these wells are near the Trona mines. This is a way, think about our pore space as a resource that the state has. We're working to monetize that. And as I think we're going to be able to attribute more income to the state from these projects, I think that should get attention. But quite frankly, even if it doesn't, we've done what we were supposed to do in the end. So we're okay with it. And I do think one of your questions was, how do we elevate optics for what Wyoming is doing? I think we are trying to do that. We have really grown our outreach program, and that's part of it. I do think one of the challenges, especially with my friend sitting next to me, is he doesn't like, we have a lot of great people who really dedicated, don't toot their own horns as much, but I knew about the School of Energy Resources long before I worked here, and they were recognized as a national leader and international leader. So I do think there is some recognition in that space. You had a lot of questions. Did I cover them?
Okay, I want to introduce an important guest, but I'll take one more question.
It's just a rich follow-up.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to follow up, and I apologize for all the questions, and we can visit later. I guess ultimately, can you define for us at some point what the economic benefit of projects such as you just outlined to the state of Wyoming, and more importantly, the employment, et cetera? Because that's the questions that, at least in Southwest Wyoming, that I'm being faced with as it relates to this carbon sequestration, et cetera. What does it mean for the state of Wyoming specifically, economically?
Mr. Chairman, great question. So we'll have to get back to you on exact jobs numbers. We're required to calculate all those as part of our projects. One thing we have, again, it was Professor Considine who worked with us, or Considine. He ran the economics for these projects and calculated benefit to the state. And as round numbers, over a 12-year life of a project for like a coal-fired power plant retrofit, the carbon capture and storage part would generate about $130 million for the state coffers, and a little bit less for the county in which it is placed. So that's one project, about 3 million tons a year. So I think that the part that we didn't include in that analysis is what is the benefit to Wyoming of keeping our oil and gas and coal operations running, remembering that we export 90% of the energy and minerals we produce in the state. You know, they're going to states that do, absent federal action, they have greenhouse gas targets. They have, some of them have renewable portfolio standards. We are trying to create a pathway for their continued operation. And I want to make sure before any plant that burns Wyoming coal or gas ever closes, that we know we've done everything we can to save it.
Okay. Representative Lawley, and then we'll introduce our guest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to, first of all, thank you. I always look forward to your report, always. It's always exciting and interesting. And, you know, early on in our interim, we talked a lot about the issue of owners, property right owners, and did they have the right kind of information? Were they at a disadvantage as this new thing called pore space now has value and they're trying to evaluate? And, you know, as a person who values property rights, those rights are diminished when a property owner doesn't have reliable information about what they need. So I just want to give a shout out and ask if you can get the committee a copy of this, because the work that was done by you guys, and particularly by Tara, what is just amazing. This is incredible. I read through this brochure about 3 or 4 different times, and it really began to respond to some of the questions I had about how do we help property owners engage in these processes under their own rights as property owners in an effective negotiation way to have the best outcomes for them. And I think you have certainly taken a huge step with that. And I think others in the committee might want to see it.
So I don't think that was mailed out with our packet, but maybe we could get it emailed to us. Thank you. Good point. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Appreciate you coming. And this, go ahead.
Sorry for the late question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we've got a lot going on in the ITC. Accolades and kudos for all you're doing there. But as we go through these demonstration capture techniques and of the various different processes, what do we do with the CO2? Are we capturing it and then releasing it, or is it actually going somewhere to a pipeline to an EOR field, or, you know, that the infrastructure for that I know is intensive. So are we just capturing it and demonstrating that it's capable of doing that, and then we release it to the atmosphere for the time being?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Heiner, that's a great question. So the Integrated Test Center, the projects that are there right now, it is being captured and released, and that data is being used to develop full-scale commercial systems. But if that plant were to add a large-scale permanent facility, and you have to remember the projects that are going on now, they're truly trying to test for months or maybe a year or two. We do have 2 wells that are already completed and more that are designed right adjacent, like 1,000-ish feet away from the ITC. So we are developing a hub there. It's just, you wouldn't like develop the infrastructure for a non-permanent project, but we are definitely, we will be ready to go if there is a commercial scale project in the area. But that's a great question.
Great. Good. One more, and then we're going to introduce our guest. One more.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This graphic on slide 11, the Sweetwater Carbon Storage Hub graphic, I was just wondering if you could email that specific graphic to us as well, because I think that's going to really help if I can share that with my constituents as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you too. Good report. We know where to find you for more questions. Thank you. President Oberlander, would you come forward and take a microphone? President Oberlander, president of the college, stepped in a little bit earlier this morning and then slipped out because she had to go to another meeting. And I sensed that there are probably even more meetings on her schedule today, but I asked her to come back through phone a friend and asked her to come back and tell us a little bit about this wonderful college and what you have developing here, because it's on the go and there's a bright future, right? Press the
Thank you, Chairman. And first of all, welcome to Gillette College. We're pleased to host this fabulous Minerals Committee. I know your work is important, and we're pleased that we could assist in the work that you have going today. And so for those of you who don't know me, I am Janelle Oberlander. I am a Wyoming native. I was born in Wyoming. I was born over the mountain in Lovell. I grew up in Gillette. My family moved here in 1972. My dad was a coal miner. He is now retired, and my mom was employed in Gillette as well. So in fact, Chris was one of my classmates. He's a year older than me, but Anyway, so I have strong ties to this community. And it's my pleasure to follow Dr. Krutka and Dr. Quinlan. What wonderful folks we have in this state that are doing the work of the people. Our partnership with the School of Energy and Resources is strong. We're pleased to be in partnership with the University of Wyoming and will continue to do so. Gillette College, as you know, is the 8th and newest community college district in the great state of Wyoming. And we continue to build out this district. Gillette College has a 54-year history serving this community. We started offering credit-bearing courses with the Northern Wyoming Community College District in 1969. The Gillette College grew and grew and grew and grew to the footprint that you see today. And there came a time where it was time for us to become independent. And that happened in August of 2021. And many of you were on those committees and many of you were on the floor when those bills came through. So we thank you for your support and we thank you for giving us this opportunity. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. We're now 2 years in. We have submitted our first documents to the Higher Learning Commission. Those have been accepted. We are now in a place where we're getting ready to submit our letter of eligibility. That will start a clock for a 1-year time period. That'll be submitted in March of 2024. So by March of 2025, we'll have to be ready for candidacy. And I have no doubt we'll be ready for that. Until that time, we continue to be accredited with the Northern Wyoming Community College District. So the students that are at the Gillette College campus are Sheridan College students, and they will be that in that category until we're fully accredited. So once we hit candidacy, once we get that achievement, then we will begin to be able to offer and disperse federal financial aid, and we'll be able to begin operating basically as an independent community college district. And so I suspect my goal is about 18 months from now, we'll hit that mark. It's a really exciting time. Not only do we have to meet the criterion for accreditation, but of course, all the federal compliance pieces that go along with being a college. And so the work that we're doing now is we're beginning to think about and dream about what our future looks like. What is it? What are the programs that we need for this community? What are the partnerships with the University of Wyoming as we begin to think about that Bachelor of Applied Science degree? What is it that our industry partners need? And as we go into the future, certainly we're in a technology revolution. We know that virtual reality, AI is going to be a part of what we do. In this building, we have probably one of the most advanced virtual reality labs in the state of Wyoming. It's right upstairs. And so we're pleased to have WIT funding for that. We're pleased to have WIT funding for our workforce development program, as well as expanding our nursing simulation. We're just about ready to purchase and bring onto campus a simulator for nursing that's all artificial intelligence. And it's going to be interesting, and we're excited to bring that technology to our students. And so I have no doubt Gillette's going to continue. Gillette College will continue to grow and change and ebb and flow as our great state does as well. So with that, Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Questions
And-
for our president? It sounds like a lot is going on here.
Chairman, we have a phenomenal group of faculty and staff at Gillette College. And of course, the community of Gillette and Campbell County so support this institution. I was told one time that I have the best gig in the state. And I got to tell you, I'm very fortunate to be in this role, and I'm very honored to be in this role as we transition this college.
Thank you. Thank you for fitting Joint Minerals into your afternoon. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Appreciate that time. Let's move on to severance taxes. A bill 179. You want to present to us, Brian?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, I can do that. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, there was a second bill draft that was submitted as part of the materials, and I'm happy to walk through that one as well at the same time.
Please do.
Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'll start with 24 LSO 179, working draft 0.4. This is 7-01 in the online meeting materials. This draft provides a severance tax exemption for the production of crude oil and natural gas as produced through enhanced oil recovery or is used in the bill draft of tertiary production techniques. So on page 2, lines 11, 12, and 15, these are just conforming amendments to the imposition of severance tax. The staff comment just provides the definition of tertiary production that is current law and that is used in the bill draft. Page 3, line 10, provides the exemption. So oil and gas production that comes from tertiary production is exempt from 1/2 of the severance taxes imposed under 204A3 and all of the severance taxes imposed under 204A4. That equates to 3% of the 6% being exempted, subject to the following. Then on line 17, to qualify, The oil and gas must be produced by means of tertiary production from carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects that commence on or after January 1, 2025. Line 23, the CCUS technology that is used in the production must qualify for the 45Q tax credit. Page 4, line 2, to ensure that the production satisfies the conditions of the exemption, the Department of Revenue may consult with the Public Service Commission and the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission before approving the exemption. Line 9 on page 4, the exemption is available to a taxpayer until the date on which the taxpayer or the person operating the CCUS technology is no longer eligible for the 45Q tax credit. And then page 4, line 15 is a reporting requirement to joint revenue and to this committee on the exemption and the revenue impacts associated with that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I stand for questions on this draft.
Committee questions? Draft 4179. Go ahead, Representative.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Also, do we have any idea what the fiscal impact is of such exemptions?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, not at this time.
Further questions? Further questions for Brian? Go ahead.
And maybe this question isn't for Brian, but in page 3, paragraph I, what was the, I guess, reasoning behind January 1st, 2025? Is there a monetary reason or something like that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, generally the tax bills have an effective date in the calendar year rather than the fiscal year.
Further? Is that covered? Okay, anything further? All right, do I have a motion on the bill?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to go through the second
Oh,
draft?
sure.
that was
Yeah,
provided.
That's right, you did mention.
And,
that.
and,
Sorry.
and Mr. Chairman, if I may, to Representative Conrad, there are, I believe there are folks from the Department of Revenue who should be available and may have information on your question in terms of the fiscal impact.
Okay.
With that, Mr. Chairman, 24 LSO 354, this is draft 0.3 that Senator Rothfuss asked to have prepared for the committee. This draft essentially does most of the same thing as 179, except instead of styling it as an exemption, it is drafted as a credit really against, I think, future severance tax that's incurred. So page 2, line 11, this would be a credit for oil and gas that comes from tertiary production subject to the following. Page 2, line 16, a taxpayer must apply for the credit on a form and in intervals that the Department of Revenue prescribes. Line 20, to qualify, it must use CCUS technology that commences on or after January 1, 2025. Page 3, line 2, and this is a difference in this bill compared to 179, and specifies that the carbon dioxide that is used in the production must be from a carbon dioxide source that originates within the state of Wyoming. Then page 3, line 7, both the CCUS technology and the carbon dioxide must qualify for the 45Q tax credit. Page 3, line 15, similarly, the department can consult with the OGCC and the PSC on the credit. Page 3, line 21, the department may promulgate rules to implement the credit. Page 4, line 1, the credit that's provided is equal to $10 for every 1 ton of carbon dioxide that's utilized in the production. And Mr. Chairman, the $10 is a figure that comes from our July meeting. SER presented the difference between the costs associated with the credit and the costs associated with the costs associated with the EOR 45Q credit and the cost associated with simply storing or sequestering the carbon dioxide. Page 4, line 6 limits the maximum amount of credit in any 1 year to 3% of the severance tax that the taxpayer pays. Page 4, line 13 makes the credit available to the taxpayer as a credit against future tax payments for up to the next 5 years. And then page 4, line 18, the credit would be available to a taxpayer as long as the taxpayer or the carbon dioxide producer is eligible for the 45Q credit Page 5, line 4 is the similar reporting requirement. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd stand for questions.
Okay, thank you. Committee questions on Brian's presentation. Let's go to public comment on either one of those pieces of legislation. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Excuse me, Pete Obermuller, Petroleum Association of Wyoming. So, Mr. Chairman, let me just say right at the outset, we can talk about the specific bills if you would like. But what I want to ask the committee to do with some regret and some culpability is that the committee actually table both of these bills, not for purposes of killing them, but for purposes of allowing the committee and all the stakeholders time to develop a bill that more closely matches what we had tried to present to the committee over the course of the previous two interim meetings. You may recall, or I hope you recall, that PAW did not ask for a severance tax exemption, nor did we ask for a credit. So when we saw these come out, it was surprising. What we had proposed is it takes a step back from that and sort of dovetails nicely to your discussion this morning with our friends from Black Hills Energy, that and to questions that have come from other members, that what do we do in this landscape where, one, for Wyoming, carbon is a commodity and we actually in many cases need more of it, and two, the federal government has decided to weigh in that they are going to, from a tax perspective, support permanent sequestration. And the policy question we were trying to solve for is, could Wyoming add its thumb to that scale, that at least from the perspective of a company like Black Hills Energy, looking at what to do with their proposed capture facility near Cheyenne, could they look at a level playing field and say, we could do it permanent sequestration, or we could do the utilization side. We could do EOR or something else. And that was the idea. So in defense of the bills, the idea is that, well, let's just make it a little easier and we'll provide a tax incentive for the EOR operator in the hopes that that will drive EOR projects, as opposed to the carbon capture facility owner who is looking at the landscape of what to do with their carbon and putting the thumb on the scale on that side. These bills don't get at that. And I think there's a much broader discussion to have here. So given the time we have till session that doesn't begin till February, and perhaps with the extraordinary persuasive abilities of the co-chairman, the management council would agree to perhaps a short virtual meeting where this issue is the only agenda item. And the task force that we talked about having in the last interim, that for reasons I'll take full responsibility for, I just did not press on the issue. It didn't form, that we actually intentionally form it, come up with a bill that we can all hopefully get behind and go from there. So that's my broad statements. If you would like to talk about specific bills, I'm happy to do that too.
Thank you, Mr. Obermuller. I think that's where we're headed anyway, but nonetheless, I still want to gather comment from the committee if they want to ask you anything. Questions? Okay, Mr. Co-Chair, you'd like to share some thoughts on this.
Mr. Chairman, I would. We looked at this, as Mr. Obermuller said, in a very short period of time. We did have a task force come out of the previous interim meeting that did never meet. It never met, workloads being what they are for everyone and that. And neither of these bills kind of do what we'd intended. I agree with Mr. Obermuller. I want to say that 354, I know that Senator Rothfuss did just a tremendous amount of work on getting that bill out and to put something forward for the committee to consider. And that's much appreciated. He took it on his own without a lot of help, frankly, from myself or others. I give him a lot of credit for that. But I think we need to go back to what we had originally talked about in kind of helping the CO2 producers. And I think that, you know, we ought to consider working on these bills. I think the committee can ask Management Council for a special 1.5 day meeting, Zoom meeting, once we get this resolved, or it becomes a personal bill going into the next session. And I'd appreciate, you know, Senator Rothfuss, he did, like I said, yeoman's work on this. If he would give us his thoughts also.
That was my next step. Sir, you want to speak to it?
Yeah, thank you.
In
And
your handouts and on your computer, you've got his amendment too. Go ahead.
and just for the clarity of folks, the amendment is identical to the bill. It's just an amendment to the original legislation that creates what the bill does. And the intent here of 354 was to try and come as close quickly as possible to what Mr. Obermueller is talking about, which was the vision that was put forward at the last Minerals Committee meeting. My thoughts on the first bill draft was that it was quite far from, I think, what the intent was. The 354 draft that I worked with staff to put together it accomplishes a lot of the check boxes, but as Mr. Obermueller notes, it doesn't accomplish all of the check boxes because the credit still ends up with the oil and gas producer. The discussion that we had at the last meeting, the intent was for that credit to end up with the CO2 producer that was then looking for how to utilize a 45Q credit, and that was the appropriate market dynamic. The reason this bill doesn't do that was because that wasn't easy, and there was a very small amount of time to get this done. So we tried. I worked with Mr. Fuller to come up with a concept of how we could do that within this bill. And there wasn't an easy way to do that because of 16.6 in the Constitution and the fact that we didn't have enough creditable tax from the CO2 producer that was coming to the state of Wyoming that we could simply credit against. That's the right answer. So if we had a clear tax, that would be easy to credit against. We didn't see that clear revenue stream to credit against. And so this was the closest to the vision that we could come up with the time we have. And so it does come close. All that said, I am absolutely not averse to tabling and trying to find that final step that gets it to the vision that we laid out at the last meeting, because I do think that's the best approach. It was the one that I was sold on. I'd be happy to participate in that working group over the next few weeks. And I'm on Management Council, so I'll certainly cast my vote in favor of of having an extra day of meeting, whether that's in person. I'm happy to do a day or half day in person, as long as it's, you know, Casper, Cheyenne, wherever else, so that we can all get there and get home quickly. I think that's an appropriate approach. And again, I appreciate all the hard work of staff of putting this together at the relatively last minute to try and get it that further step. It's a good starting point, but there's that one additional puzzle piece that I think is missing, and then it's in pretty good shape.
Committee, let's do this. Do you have questions for either Senator Rothfuss, Co-Chair Burkhart, or Mr. Obermueller while they're here? No further questions. So absent objection, we'll proceed with Mr. Co-Chair, would you like to have a working group on this and go back to Management Council after we do our work there? What's your thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, I think what we need to do is I'm willing to give Management Council at least a heads up. I think they deserve that what we're looking at. And then the working group most likely would be just right off the top of my head, Senator Rothfuss, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Obermueller, myself, and I think we had talked briefly about including some other people to work through this, probably Department of Revenue on these. Even the title is not what we had anticipated. We didn't plan any sort of tax relief, so to speak, on severance tax. So I think it needs a lot of work. That would be my idea. And then
Let's do this.
go for a special meeting or it becomes an individual bill.
I think we do a digital meeting if we need to.
Yes.
Staff, did you get those names for the working group?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
just on that working group, if you're planning to designate it right now, folks from SER and EORI probably
Yes.
need to be a part of it as well.
Certainly.
And yes, probably Director Whitman from EOR and probably Kara Fornstrom from SER.
So repeat the full list
Okay, so
for staff.
the full list would be Kara Fornstrom with SER, Lon Whitman with EORI, Mr. Obermuller, Senator Rothfuss, myself, and probably a designee out of Department of Revenue. And Mr. Fuller. Yes, if I did.
And will you
said
put a
that.
note together to management council? with
Yes,
both
I
our
will.
name With both our names on it, seeking that additional extended
Yes.
time.
Yes, and
perhaps-
Mr. Fuller can help with that. as he
And
just
perhaps a Zoom
indicated.
for the group to come in for a vote. Okay,
Mr. Chairman?
go ahead.
I don't think I'd add anything to the discussion, but I'd like to listen so I could learn. Is there any way to make that working group available to anyone
Yeah.
who wants to listen in? I don't know if I speak for myself, but I
Technically,
just want to listen so I can learn this issue a little bit better.
technically, we could just send to the whole group when the working group is meeting and this is where you step in and listen. That's digitally, we can do that.
Yes.
Okay, anybody else want to use their time like that? There you go. There's an opportunity. Okay, and you'll take care of the letter.
Yep.
All right. Absence ejection, that's what we're going to do with these two pieces of legislation. Any further comment on either one of them at this point? Any public comment? Any comment on the Zoom? Okay, thank you, Mr. Obermuller. Where we're gonna go. And that puts us to tour of the Bel Air mine. Anybody have anything before that? What's the logistics for doing this, Brian?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Deti did let me know the bus is here, so I think at our leisure, we can,
Step
You know,
out on the bus, we do the
and-
tour, and then we come back here after we're done.
correct, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions on that, folks?
I think we can leave our stuff here.
Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman, can we just have like 10 minutes to go to the bathroom and
Oh, yeah. Can't believe you
All
want
that.
that kind of time. Okay.